I remember one of those times I was walking around on the streets of New York just kind of muttering to myself.
You blended in with a lot more New Yorkers,
exactly.
by the way.
I actually had a drama teacher in high school who was like, if someone's ever following you, just start doing a Shakespeare monologue under your breath and they'll think that you're a crazy person and they'll leave you alone.
Hey everyone, welcome to UnCoupling, the podcast that talks about breakups. Yes, that podcast. But we're also a podcast that talks about that breakups are not failures. It is just another chapter in your life to empower yourself. I'm your host, Holland, and this week I am thrilled to introduce our guest, Jessica Rothe.
Hello.
Jessica Rothe is an amazing singer and actor, best known for starring in Universal's Happy Death Day, the indie Gaslight, and the upcoming film that just premiered at Toronto Film Festival with Bill Skarsgård, Boy Kills World. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glowing after such a lovely little
we wax poetic career accomplishments.
It's just nice sometimes to be like, yeah, those things happened. And also, I love what I do so much. And so it's nice to almost get like a best of
a reminder that we actually do work for a living in these times that we're not working.
That are just very odd. Yeah. But also give us time to focus on other things in our life.
I feel like when people are like shouting out people's coffees, they should like shout out their career accomplishments instead.
I agree. I love being people's hype person. Like I love, and that's one of the reasons I'm not a big party person, but I do love introducing people I love to other people because I want to be like, these are the things that they've done that make them amazing. Welcome to my friends.
It's not a roast. It's a most.
Yes. Oh, I like that. The most of.
The most of. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
We like to talk about breakups on this podcast, but not for the obvious salacious reason. We like this idea of uncoupling because at the end of the day, it is truly just a chapter to learn more about yourself, learn what you want to change, learn what you want in a partner, learn if you want a partner. So that's why we're here. And everyone's a little brave to step into this like taboo conversation. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I actually really like talking about
breakups
with my friends and thinking about them because I do think that what you've said is so, like, of course, like many other people, I think I love kind of the salacious gossipy part of it because it's just so fun sometimes. And I think when you've had a friend who's gone through a really bad breakup, sometimes there's so much joy in being like, yeah, that person fucking sucks. They're the worst. But it is always because you learn so much about yourself through those experiences. And I know that like I've had a couple breakups, but kind of the one for me that's the big bad breakup definitely. It was such an uncomfortable time, but it was uncomfortable because it was filled with so much growth and self-discovery. And the partner that I have now, my husband, I would have never met had I not been in that relationship. But also, I don't think I was fully formed and fully grown in a way that I could have accepted the kind of love that he was offering me. And so I just really love kind of everything your podcast is about.
Thanks. And when did the big bad, I love this idea that we're going to call this relationship the big bad because everyone's got a big bad in a lot of aspects of their life, but especially with relationships. How many years ago did the big bad end?
I haven't seen the big bad in like 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Wow.
But the relationship ended in I actually don't know if I know the right answer to this question because it kind of was a weird fade out and it just became so clear that it wasn't the right one, but I had kind of like twisted myself into knots believing that he was the only good thing about me. That like when we would meet people, I would think like, oh, they must think I'm so lucky to be with this person. Like that is being with him is because he's so amazing. It's a mark to me of being chosen. And I very much sometimes still am, but very much used to be someone who would kind of like absorb other, like I love going into someone's life and being like, and now I live here too. And like, I love your friends and I love your activities and I want to do all the things you do because I love you and I like want to be a part of that. And I think because we met so young and also because of the insane nature of New York and trying to be an actor and that whole process, I think that that was really accentuated for me.
Which is completely understandable. It's incredibly tantalizing to look up to something that you really think is 24 hours a day. It must be amazing to be that person.
Yeah.
And then you get to be a part of that person.
Yeah.
And like you said, you're setting up shop within his identity and within his world. And that you are such a centered fixture in his world.
Yeah. And I thought he was
the best feeling ever in our 20s especially.
Exactly. And I thought he was so talented and so magnetic. And I was just like, oh, how you chose. Like that I think was a big theme for me, especially in my 20s, was like being chosen. Like you chose me, and there is weight behind that even when you're kind of being a dick. I was living in New York City at the time, and this particular ex, it had been going downhill for a while, and I didn't trust him. I didn't trust him at all. I knew he was having relationships with other people. I knew I wasn't getting for the full story. I knew I wasn't a priority, but instead of taking those warning signs and being like, gotta go, I was like, ooh, this means I need to lean in harder.
This
like
means I need to work even harder. I am not succeeding.
Exactly. Like this obviously must be something wrong with me that I'm, so I need to like prove my worth and work harder and do all these things and show him what an amazing partner I can be, because we're obviously supposed to be together. And this is about my lack of worth, rather than being like, A, we're probably not right for each other, and B, this person isn't treating me nicely and I deserve better than that, because I just was so twisted upside down. I couldn't even conceptually understand something like that. But we were in this incredibly kind of codependent, toxic relationship that just wouldn't end.
And it doesn't feel toxic when it is that codependent. It feels loving.
It feels loving and almost like air. Like it feels like air. And I remember one of those times I was walking around on the streets of New York just kind of muttering to myself.
You blended in with a lot more New Yorkers,
exactly.
by the way.
I actually had a drama teacher in high school who was like, if someone's ever following you, just start doing a Shakespeare monologue under your breath and they'll think that you're a crazy person and they'll leave you alone. So maybe it was a weird like self-defense thing where I was like, if any stranger talks to me, I will just start crying. So I just need to drive everybody away. But I remember so clearly just thinking like you just have to put one foot in front of the other. When you're going somewhere, the way you get there is with many steps, many small steps. It doesn't feel like that much movement. But as long as every morning I wake up, and I joined a kickboxing gym, and
you were putting the pieces together slowly.
I was. And
even if it was outside of your body, you were still doing that.
Exactly. And looking back, that was a time when my friend group shifted because the breakup felt so messy and so overwhelming. I branched out. I made a lot of new friends. It was kind of around that time is when I really started working more in film, which I don't even think was a conscious choice, but I was
from theater.
Yeah, and I loved it, and I didn't know if I would, and I just started being cast in more projects that were indie films and other kinds of things, and I'm sure that there is some correlation to an opening up in me and maybe a different kind of vulnerability that was translating in a different way. I also just stopped saying no to anything. It was a big summer of yes.
Big bad led to a lot of yes.
A lot of yes. Big bad led to a lot of yes. I was in a place where what I needed from a friend in that moment was being like, fuck that guy, not speaking to him never again.
You needed like a girl gang.
Yeah. And so anytime I would find out that someone who I felt like was someone that I assumed would be in that camp had coffee with him or was having contact with him, I felt so betrayed. And the funny thing is, since then, I've been in that situation with someone where it's not even that I particularly like the other person. It's just that I'm like, I don't know if I feel comfortable icing this person completely. And so I have a lot more empathy for the humans in my life who it was a bit murkier.
When we're younger, it's more polarizing.
Yeah. I'm lucky that I have an amazing family, and my mom especially. And my parents were like, bridge burn, never again.
That was your girl gang, were your parents.
Yeah, my parents were my girl gang.
So when that relationship did end, how soon did your husband, future husband / friend at the time, how quick was he to step in and be the shoulder to lean on and be a support system?
Well, our first friend hang was like not even a week after the breakup had happened.
Okay.
And I showed up and it was just like mascara running down my face and just sobbed in this coffee shop in Gramercy. And then we finished hanging out and he was like, I need to leave because I'm meeting up my friend to eat pie. Do you want to go eat pie with us? And I was like, yes,
I was going to say the first food you do, what did you eat when you first broke up? But it's potentially pie within the first week at
yes,
least. Yes,
pie.
Yeah. What kind of pie? Do you remember?
I do. It was this place called Blue Stove that isn't there anymore because of COVID, which is very sad. And they had an incredible apple pie. And then we also had a chocolate pie. And both of them were fantastic.
Chocolate cream pie.
And they made breakfast biscuits that would knock your socks off. Like it's a crime that place is gone. It was such an institution. I love it so much.
I love like well-made breakup foods. It's not like Cheetos from 7-Eleven. It's like that, there's like heart put into those types of dishes.
Yeah, it really
that makes it like in just a lot fonder to tell the story. I'm sure in the moment it felt very numb and you're like, can I even taste the chocolate cream pie?
But exactly. But also I have such a visceral sense memory of that place because when it was cold outside, the windows would steam up because there was so much like yummy, doughy, yeasty
window.
Warm smell that existed in that place.
Did you guys ever go back?
Oh, when we started dating, that was like every weekend we would go there. It was one of our favorite places. But my husband wasn't even the first person I started dating because we were just friends.
So
and
that's good that you went on other dates. Not that you knew your story in the future, but it was subconsciously.
It was good. I had
Would you tell him about the dates?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He knew about all of that. I mean, I tried to, short of getting on a dating app, I had someone set me up on a blind date. I went on a date with someone who asked for my number at a bar, which I had never done.
Those into nightmares, but I've done that before. It's fun.
It was lackluster,
it's very
but it was
lackluster.
Fine. I dated this very lovely, very funny British boy for a while who only wore red socks and was like it's that person that you look back and you're like, yeah, I dated that person when I was in my 20s and lived in New York. And I only have fond memories of him. Though when we broke up, we'd only been together for like a month. He told me that it was because he could tell I was falling in love with him, which I thought was like the most condescending thing that anyone had ever said to me. Except then me being me, I walked away and I was like, was I falling in love with him? Maybe I didn't know it. And
you were still growing your empowerment stage of creating your own voice in your head versus what people would tell you or you would convince yourself you thought because of what they would think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I still was kind of a glutton for punishment, that I was really convinced that part of allure of I had a little thing almost for like bad boys, but like emotionally.
Red Sox bad boys.
Red Sox bad boys, but more kind of, I think, bad boys for me in the sense of like, oh, boys who kind of just aren't nice to you. Mm-hmm. Whereas my husband, when we didn't start dating right away, even once we realized we liked each other because it was so fraught with just weight of so much overlap and things, I would always ask him, I was like, why are you're so respectful and you're so kind to me? And and he was like, first of all, it's a crime that no one's ever treated you this way because I'm just doing the bare minimum. But also, you didn't know me when I was 25. And when I was 25, I did not have the capacity to treat women correctly.
I was going to ask how many relationships you saw him go through or dates that you saw him go through, and did he improve over time as well?
Oh, totally. I mean, he only really dated one person while we were won't they like friendship quickly into a like the first time that I know this is supposed to be more about breakups than current relationship, but the first time that I realized I was in love with him, we were sitting in his apartment and we were going to go out for drinks with some friends and he was playing like a video game. And I looked over at him and I swear to God, in that moment, my eyes turned into like little heart-shaped emojis. And I was like,
it just transitioned in that one moment.
It all changed. And then we avoided each other for a while because it was too scary. But so I only saw him in that one relationship. And I do think that We also dated long distance for 5 years, which was
That's a thing.
it was a thing.
Yeah.
And so we both had I think the relationship that we're in now has gone through a lot of growth. But even at the time when we started seeing each other, he was kinder to me than anyone I had ever been in a relationship with, and more respectful, and also more like, I want you to do your own thing. Like, don't do my thing. You're welcome to. You're welcome to come along, but like, you don't like this. Why? Like, go do something that makes you happy.
The solitude.
Yeah. He was a big advocate of me pursuing my own joy. Because I think he is very good in a way that I do think is rare, but I feel like is more ingrained in men and maybe taught to men. He is so okay taking space for himself and just doing the thing he wants to do. And if he doesn't want to do something, he's like, no, thank you. And it never feels shitty. It never feels bad. And I long for and hope to and wish to be better at that, because I think that it's healthy.
This podcast is one little chip in the bucket of trying to reteach girls that are coming up after us that why is it? Because I completely agree that men take more time for themselves, and if they don't go to something that you've invited them to, and then you later found out, well, they went to the driving range or play tennis. You're like, you can't instill joy in yourself after you've turned down my offer for my activity. Yes, they can.
Yeah.
They can go do that.
Yeah.
And they will, and they should. And so I find that, I think we're around the same age, and in our 30s, growing up in the 90s, there's a lot of, like unconditioning that I hope the next generation will build better support systems and walls around themselves that build more identity and can earlier prepare themselves, even though you were still quite young when you met your husband, not having to go through some of those growing pains. Maybe it's necessary. Maybe it's something that we subconsciously will fall back on anyway. But at least if we're told the words, maybe it'll come around through osmosis. So in that, what would we say, like year, like walk me through a timeline of like week 1, month 1, where did you feel the transitions, and like what was the process of breaking up? What were the things on your list that you prioritized?
So much of it is a blur. Also, I think part of the answer to this question, which is a question you asked earlier, and I realized I just took a really long tangent and didn't ask it. The breakup was not a swift one and done.
Okay.
It definitely prolonged. There were many late night tearful show up at each other's places. Not good. Don't do it. It was very bad. At like I straight up had one night where he showed up at my apartment at 11 o'clock at night, and it was like a Stella, like he was like
16 candles outside.
Yeah, and I was like, this is so romantic. And I looked back and I was like, that was so incredibly unfair.
And what made you hold your guns and say, we're not going to get back together?
I didn't at first. Well, so part of it was, luckily for me, I had enough time to mourn and grieve and gather my pieces before that started happening.
Okay.
And so my feet were on the ground a little more, because initially after the breakup, so week 1, I like a blur. I remember waking up the morning after the breakup and being like, oh my God, I'm still alive. Like the sun exploded, but I'm still here. And that was both an alarming way to feel, but also I think in some ways validating of like, this thing that you thought was the thing that was making your world go round isn't there anymore, and the world's still spinning. You're still here, and you're still you, and you're still fine. And so it was a little bit of an acknowledgement of like, oh, I thought this was air that I was breathing, but maybe it was something else.
You stepped outside of the Truman Show.
Exactly. And I was like, oh, there's a bigger world.
You held on to that when he did show up at your house.
Yeah, but and then I did a lot of kickboxing, like every day, then crying in kickboxing class to the point where the teacher would come up being like, are you okay? And I was like, yes.
But what a healthy way to like expel.
Yeah. Lots of kickboxing, lots of yoga.
Crying while kickboxing.
Yeah. I unfortunately had very little appetite when I'm in active grief, which I think was part of it. But I remember the first day I was with a director friend of mine, and we were talking about the breakup, and I suddenly got ravenous. I was so hungry. And we went, there was this place called the Meatball Shop, and you could get like meatball and whatever kind of meat you wanted, plus a sauce. Like you could customize your own little meatball experience, and
Heaven.
I loved it. And I just remember I couldn't eat enough. And she said something that I think was so smart about like I think you're you may not know it, but you're in a new stage of grieving this breakup.
Did you know it though? Because whenever I feel a big tinge of hunger, it's like something awakens in you and you feel a pivot, you feel a transition.
In the moment, I don't know if I did. Looking back,
Okay.
I think so. But I was so out of body for those couple months. The first couple, I just felt like I was sleepwalking through life, and I was doing a lot of things that I knew in my brain I needed to do. Like I didn't want to go to kickboxing or yoga. I didn't want to go hang out with my friends and eat meatballs. But I'm glad I did all those things, because also then I definitely went through that part of the breakup phase where it was all I could talk about. And I also, another thing I remember is getting to that point where I was like, I'm so bored with myself. I'm so bored of talking about this and talking about him and just talking about.
Well, that was you like reaching your current size and then
busting through that
out.
shell.
Exactly. What was your biggest change coming out of the relationship? And it's hard to boil it down to like a top 3 or.
Oh man. Knowing my own self-worth and being fiercely defensive and offensive about making sure that I am in a partnership that honors that. I think I became a much better communicator. Like when my husband and I were dating long distance and I moved here, I was able to actually move here and make friends and start relationships. And I wasn't always like, oh, maybe I need to go back because I feel unsafe being alone. It was like, no, I love being alone here. I love this person. I wish they were here, but I also can build a life for myself, and it's not dependent on someone else's life.
Which is a great assignment maybe is long distance, although it's more difficult. But if you don't start as long distance and then you've tried it out as an assignment to instill your own identity after dating this new person.
And that was also a big test for me specifically in this body and this mind with these emotions, because that was something I think there are people who have who maybe their lesson isn't that, but that for me was a huge, like you said, a really good assignment. But
peace is what should come in a relationship, not angst or you shouldn't be more inside your own head. It should bring you outside your body, or outside your head, I should say, is the good relationship.
My therapist would always say, she was like, I don't think it's supposed to be this hard. And I was like, no, it is this hard, because I am so in love and I'm so committed, and we're really in love, and that's why we're fighting. And she was like, no. And then when I started dating my husband, I was like, oh, this is so easy. And there also was, I remember the first time I confronted him about something, and I was so scared. I had so much fear around this confrontation. And he was like, oh, okay, totally, I'm sorry. And it was so, it blew me away. And it wasn't even that big of a thing I was needing to talk to him about. I think I had just built up so much stored trauma around situations that felt confrontational. Because my ex would do this thing sometimes when we would fight, where he would just like put his head on he would look at me and then just put his head on the table.
He would disengage.
He would completely disengage. But again, in terms of things I learned about myself, I think it was also because I wasn't being as direct. And maybe in those moments, I don't honestly remember because it was triggering and bad. But in the parts that I can take ownership
of yourself.
And ownership of the ways that I changed. It's like, oh, you went from being a very, very, it's still a people pleaser, don't get me wrong, but like an intense people pleaser who was willing to completely bend over backwards and spend all day baking cookies and then taking a train to go to Connecticut to give them to your boyfriend's classmates so that they would like you, so they would remind him how great you were. Like that my priority shifted.
Yeah.
And I just became so much better about vocalizing what I needed. Which then is great. And I think I still fall into this trap sometimes, but I definitely before fell into the trap in a big way of wanting my partner to read my mind, and that was a sign of love. and wanting to be that person for my partner. And now it's like, no, like you
can just ask.
Just ask. It doesn't make it less wonderful. If you ask, say to your partner, you know what? I really need a hug right now. The hug is still filled with love and well-intentioned just as much as if they see you and they're like, they need a hug. Like,
or it doesn't matter. It's the same result.
Yeah. And but I get that. It's intoxicating wanting someone who knows.
But that's a fantasy. And that's where I think, even this idea that a breakup is, like we said, a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. That's a myth that we've been conditioned to not talk about breakups, sweep it under the rug. They disappear from an Instagram grid. Yeah. It's like they've never existed because we don't want to admit that's a failure. But it's not a failure. We just structure it as a failure. But really, it's quite a pivot to a lot of gifts.
It's funny because we're talking so exclusively and very much about a romantic breakup, but I'm actually working on developing a project that I love so much with my manager that is about friendship breakups in that way. But also how, like, one thing we kind of explore in it is just because the breakup happened doesn't mean that the relationship was for naught, because you've probably learned incredible things about yourself, and whether the relationship fed you or not, like whether some of the most, like, I'm sure if I really thought about it, there are wonderful things that my ex gave me, and also that I know ex-friends that I've had breakups with, that I am who I am because of them in positive ways within the relationship. But I also very much know, like, going through those hard times have made me, like, put on my big girl boots and pants and go through them. But you're totally right that we just don't talk about it so much. It's like, even I'm noticing it with myself on this podcast. I wanted to pivot and talk about, like, my wonderful husband, and that is such a direct correlation of the
breakup led you to
the breakup led me to this wonderful, amazing thing. And for me, it's such a direct correlation and such a tangible connection that it's really easy to put a lot of the celebration in that. But it is less fun and hard to talk about the breakups. And I also think it's so interesting the ways that those breakups change and the way we talk about them the further away you get from them. But still, I don't know if you have any like this, like, I might need to see this person soon. And the thought of seeing them makes me want to curl up. And
I think, knowing that if you're in a different chapter in your life, you're still going to be affected by a chapter that's earlier in the book. But you've learned so much between that chapter and the chapter you're in now. It's just armor that's going to more elegantly carry you through that experience. Not that you can't feel the pricks from the earlier
That's
chapter.
such a beautiful way to put that.
You're in a book, and you're much further down in the story. You're in, like, Act 3.
Yeah.
And that was Act 1.
Yeah.
And so you've already been through the climax, and the themes are already set in place. And so all you need to do is just sit in your current chapter and you'll feel it, but you don't have to live in it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you were going to write, because I think there needs to be it's like the real love story to little girls.
Yeah.
And what moms and aunties and best friends, what we should be telling all of our friends' daughters, our own daughters, would you say identity and feeling like you're choosing yourself is so important before choosing someone else?
Yes, 100%. Because I think that, like, one of the things I loved so much about my husband, who I think is the best, and one of the things that I kind of wasn't ready for until the big bad breakup happened and I did a lot of work, was this idea of, I'm okay on my own and you're okay on your own. And when we're together, that's amazing. But also, I have enough autonomy and enough confidence in myself, and I am actively choosing to take care of myself, and that makes me a better partner for you, rather than kind of dropping everything and running to coddle or baby or fix. And I still personally struggle with that because I'm a total people pleaser, and I love also to feel very needed. And I think that a lot of women, we're taught in so many ways, conscious and subconscious, that being needed as a woman is an incredibly powerful thing. So need yourself. Need yourself.
Need yourself. Yeah, I completely can relate with that.
Oh, and sorry, that just made me think of something else I feel like is so important that I learned. Right after the breakup, I was so convinced that he had like vampire stole my shine. I was like, I used to be so much like cooler and funnier and talented and all these things. And I gave him all my power. I gave him my power and I let him like
the jar's empty.
The jar's empty and he's going to go on and be with someone else. And he took this from me and I will be alone and sad and empty forever because he stole like my soul. And that's just not what happens. That's not how it
Ariel is fiction.
Works. I know, but I really thought it wasn't. No, but I do think that, hopefully the next generation and beyond of not just of women, but of loving, humans. Caring, open human people learn that like boundaries are good and knowing your own self-worth is good and not giving away your power is good. But also if you are an extreme empath, which I do feel that I am, and if you are someone who really loves to give energy, it doesn't go away. It's not a one, like you have resources and it will come back even if you feel like that's been taken from you. Because I do think that that's such a big part of breakups that I've seen in myself and people that I love and care about is that feeling of like almost I was bamboozled. I was tricked and I gave away this time or I gave away this part of myself or this part of my heart or my energy or resources, whatever it is that you feel like you've been cheated of something and that's been taken away from you. But you are whole in who you are and no one can... what they can do is they can make you doubt that it's there. Mm-hmm. And they can also make you sad. And sometimes when you're sad, it's hard to see the beautiful, like connective, buzzy glory that is you inside of you and what makes you unique. But no one can take that away from you, even in a shitty breakup.
And even all those amazing years that you did give to him and to yourself, just because they're no longer with him, it's not like the jar was empty because it was with him and now it's with a new person. You have to refill it in a different way. Like you're the through line through it all.
Exactly. Yeah. And I do really love that I have that now, a better understanding of that now. And it doesn't always feel true, but yeah, like you said, and I think that's one of the reasons that me being in a long distance relationship at first with my husband and me moving so soon after this breakup and being in a new space, I was like, oh, I'm the only constant here. Mm-hmm. That's wild. That's the first time that's been true. And it's pretty okay. Like I'm good with this. I like that I'm the constant. And I think that so often in relationships, it's hard to hold on to that, especially when you're young and figuring it out and throwing mud at the wall and seeing what sticks.
And the biggest takeaway, I think, for him, hopefully, is that you've learned all these lessons about yourself with him as the catalyst. Mm-hmm. And let's just hope that he did the same for himself.
Yeah.
That you were a bunch of lessons for him and a mirror for him.
Yeah.
To realize that he didn't mean it at all when you got back to New York. Yeah.
Well, and also that, like, one of the other big things that I realized with us in a relationship, he and I, was we just were not right for each other. Like, what I hope, I don't know, because I do not talk to this person, but what I hope is that I was never going to, I'm not a fighter. I fight for things I believe in, but I don't like confrontation. Yeah. I do not like it. The person he is with now, I think that, like, he needed a little bit of pushback. Yeah. And I was like, that, you know what? That's never going to be me. It's never going to be me. And that's not my fault. And it doesn't make me a less good partner in the world. It makes me a less good partner for him. Mm-hmm. But even if they're not, it's more about one of the big things I learned is not everyone is right for everyone. And it's okay to find the right person for you.
Yeah.
And not to try to fit a round peg into a square hole.
Was there a particular point that you, through the kickboxing and the crying and building new friendships, you're like, I like being alone, or I prefer being alone? That there was that crossover of needing to be the fixture in someone else's life and that desperate feel to be needed, that desperate need to be needed, and then you preferring to be alone.
Yeah, you know what? I think there was. As you say that, I have a very visceral memory of lying in a yoga studio and looking up at the ceiling in Shavasana. And I don't know if in that moment I was like, I like being here by myself, but I think I just felt very autonomous in that moment. And like, oh, I moved to New York by myself and I live here and I pay my own bills and I have a job and I like all of these things that I don't think I necessarily was giving myself credit for. And even if they were things that had been born of pursuing a career or maybe slight decisions that had been made in relation to other people, it was like, but you built this life and you did this thing and you are the one who fought and continues to fight every day to do it. And there are still things that I would much prefer to do with other people. Like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be someone who loves traveling alone because I love forming memories with people, whether it's my romantic partner or friends or my family. I personally, and then we can talk about it. Like, I just get a lot of joy from that. But I also love doing pottery or art. I love reading. Like there are kind of solitary activities that I feel so much more comfortable and more in my skin doing.
Are there particular hobbies that you took on since the breakup, which has been a hot second, but something that maybe you wouldn't have done in that previous relationship that you do now?
Oh, I feel like all of them. All of them. Well, because I think that I think a lot of times even the things that I did then were in service of him and in service of wanting to feel kind of not worthy, but it was in service of the relationship. Whereas now, when I do, like I've started doing pottery recently, and it's been a really interesting process because I'm for the first time developing my visual artistic voice, and that feels really intense and kind of scary because I'm like, but I don't know what it is. And one of my friends who's a potter who also is teaching me how to oil paint and all these other things, like he's like, but you'll figure it out. You have an artistic voice, just lean into it, make some mistakes. And I don't know if I could have done that in that relationship because I think I would have been so worried about getting it right or almost not wanting to like, I don't even know if this was true, but for example, like being in a relationship where it's like, oh, well, it makes my partner feel sad every time I draw something that they can't draw. So I'm not going to draw. Like those were the kinds of decisions I was making in that relationship. And again, very much not necessarily because the partner I was with at that time asked that of me or expected it, but I think I put that on myself of
a filter.
And in order to be loved by this person, I need to diminish myself. And I maybe I was getting that message from externally from the world or from him, or maybe it was just internal because it was an expectation that I had somehow jumped to.
I just think if love we're taught as the number one thing that we could achieve. And so you're thinking, oh, if I put all my energy towards building this love, that equals more happiness.
Yeah.
And that joint love will be so much more worthy than my single love, like my solo love.
Yeah.
My singular love, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, well, if that hobby doesn't, put eggs in the basket towards that big joint love, it's not really it's not going to be as fulfilling.
Yeah. Or it doesn't have the same currency almost.
Yeah.
And almost all of the art projects I would do around the time that I was in a relationship with the big bad were gifts for him. It never was just like, I'm just going to draw this.
Because you were building the joint love.
I was building the joint love. I was really committed to that joint love.
Yeah.
But it's also cool and fun because like the first time I ever baked bread was with my ex, and I love baking bread. And that's something
then
I've
that's
been
something
able
you
to
got to
carry
carry forward.
forward. Whereas my husband and I now are beekeepers, and that is probably something I never would have done with my ex. I don't. Maybe he is very into being an apiarist.
That's the only thing we're going to talk about at the wedding is how much you both love bees now.
How much we love
All
bees and
three
love
of you.
our honey. We're going to be like, wow, maybe we should consider like opening this relationship. No. But yeah, I do. That is one thing I love about relationships, and that I always try to remember even when something's ended, is I love meeting people and getting to know them and learning about parts of the world I never would have learned about otherwise. And I think that then figuring out which of those you want to carry forward after that relationship ends is always important. Like I love Parks and Rec, and I always think about the Ann Perkins character and how she takes on like the hobbies and the interests of whoever she's dating at the time, but then throws them away because she doesn't actually
enjoy it
about any of them. And so I hope that
you can put honey on your bread. That's my hope for you.
Yes, I do. And I made a challah which had honey in the bread.
That's
even
more
that's the
meta.
real metaphor. That is the metaphor
Challah.
of this. Challah.
We are going to play a game because I love games. Try your best for a one-word answer, but it can be like a hyphen answer.
Oh, I'm so bad at one-word answers.
That's okay. It can be a hyphen answer. It
Great.
can be one sentence. This is called the UnCoupling lightning round. I will say that correctly. Number 1, there's 11 questions on here. We can do a pass and come back if you need.
Great.
Number 1, when was your first breakup?
High school. He broke my heart, shattered it. My car died because we sat in the car talking about the breakup, and then the light was on and he drove away, and then my battery was dead and I had to call my parents to come pick me up.
That's one word. That's one word.
That's totally one word.
That's one word. That's a great
Keep
one word.
Going. Sorry.
Do you remember your first crush?
Yes, I do remember my first crush. It was a boy in kindergarten.
What is the best example of a relationship in your life?
I would say my parents.
Aw.
Yeah.
What is your go-to breakup movie?
Probably Sleepless in Seattle.
What is your go-to breakup song?
Alanis Morissette. Anything.
Jagged Little Pill
Jagged
album,
Little
of course.
Pill album, whole way through, screaming at the top of my lungs.
Okay, we already talked about this pie story, which I love, but what is your breakup food? It can still be the pie.
But like cake.
Cake. First thing you do after a breakup, which we kind of know.
Cry.
Cry, kickbox.
Yeah, mostly
Both.
cry.
Mostly cry.
Yeah.
What was your number 1 red flag in a relationship or a potential relationship? Lying.
It's not cute.
What is your number 1 green flag in a relationship or potential relationship?
Kindness.
Kindness.
Yeah.
And what is your beige flag? To describe a beige flag, what is a fun quirk of yours that you think your partner loves about you?
That's a beige flag.
Apparently.
I mispronounce a lot of words.
Oh, that's fun.
I don't know if this is why I'm slightly dyslexic, but I, for a really long time, said demon instead of demon.
Okay, in a long-term relationship, last question. What was the moment you knew your husband was the one?
It was more there were a lot of little moments. But it kept building into something better and better.
It's the snowball effect, the rubber band, the rubber band ball effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was nice.
Just a lot of little rubber bands.
Yeah, and he is still putting rubber bands on that ball.
Aw.
Good job, husband.
Ba-dum-bum. Thanks for playing the slight thunderstorm of a lightning round.
Yeah, I told you bad at one-word answers.
No.
There's lots of hyphens between words.
I'm not practicing what I preach because I am not in for one-word answers, but we're trying. We're trying our best. So last but not least, to take us out, what are your words of wisdom?
Words of wisdom, I really think is you contain multitudes and you are worth so much, and you deserve to be with someone who celebrates and loves and appreciates all of the wonderful, weird, hard, terrible, bad things. But we'll end on wonderful. All of the wonderful, weird, bad, terrible, fantastic, beautiful things about you. And if you are in a relationship with someone who does not see all those things, you will find someone who does. And so it's time to move on. And you should also know your own worth.
Thank you, Jessica, for coming on and being so open and vulnerable and proving that breakups are not failures. They are just the next chapter to empowering yourself. And your story is like textbook of how we can teach, like you said, not just girls, but young humans of how to love themselves differently and earlier on.
Yeah. If you're in a bad relationship, get out. There are better things on the other side. I promise.
Thank you all for listening to UnCoupling, and thank you to Jessica Roth for her sage advice. We really appreciate you being so vulnerable. And don't forget to subscribe to UnCoupling. I'm your host, Holland Roden, and we will see you next week. UnCoupling podcast is produced by Stampede Ventures, Jason R. Ellis, and Holland Roden.